You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
Big time.
Just diving in. Very excited to have Coach Rio with us. What's up? How's it going? Like, you're one of the few coaches that get this opportunity to, when your school season's done, you dive straight into professional. So, how has it been just going nonstop?
But I appreciate you having me on. First and foremost, always nice connecting with you. Um, yeah, man, it's busy. It's
Mhm,
busy. Yeah, between TMU and then
mhm.
when Scarborough gets going in about April, May, there's really not too much rest time. I maybe have 3, 4 weeks in that March, April range, and then it, hop right into it, right? So a good 11 months out of the year, staying busy with basketball, but I wouldn't have it any other way, man. You know how it is.
Yeah,
It's
I think
fun. It's fun.
it is, and like, it's it's it's. I like the word you just used, fun, because that's kind of like the avenue that I'm gonna take to dive into the next question,
Right.
where so I have heard of you from like the past schools that you were coaching at, high schools. You've been able to do push your coaching to the university level. Um, but how I got really acquainted to you, was through Twitter. And you're a really cool follow on Twitter because you share a lot of stuff. So just diving into that, where did all of that come from? Like, just that love and fun for sharing stuff and just getting the eye for it.
For sure, man. I think early on in my coaching career. So I've been coaching for about 10 years now. So going back to 2013, 2014 is when I started. And I went back to my old high school and started coaching there, the varsity girls and the varsity boys basketball team. And I love film. From that starting point, I went out, bought a camcorder, bought a tripod off Amazon, and just started recording all of our games, breaking it down, recording workouts, going back, watching it with players. So I think from the get go, right, like understanding how powerful of a tool it is. I loved it, right off the bat, and just being able to analyze the game from
Mhm.
another perspective, another layer to it, right? Um, and then in relation to the Twitter, man, I never thought it would get to this point where I have 18, 19,000 followers, and I'm able
Really
to
nice follow. Really nice follow. I
appreciate
encourage
that.
everybody to go follow. But yes, continue.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing to be able to connect to coaches and getting feedback from coaches and you know coaches telling me, hey, appreciate you posting that play. I use it with my high school or university team or whatever it is. It's pretty cool to get that um,
Mhm.
feedback from them, and I could definitely it definitely feels like I'm going down the right path.
For
Um,
sure. For sure.
but yeah, that
100%.
one was like starting off on Twitter. That was a kind of a story in itself. So that happened right at the beginning of COVID.
Everybody blows up during COVID. I'm telling you.
It was what, March, April 2020,
Yes.
right at the beginning of COVID. And I think the season for OSBA just finished. That's when I was coaching at TRC.
Mhm.
The kids just went on March break, so I was rocking solo at the house. And how COVID started, they said, hey, 1, 2 weeks, and we're back into it. 2, 3 years later, right? But I remember the first week, I played NBA 2K, popped it back in the Xbox, played a full season with Golden State, won a championship. And then after a week, I'm like, all right, what's next? Like, you know what I mean? So kind of bored. And I'm like, all right, let's hop on Synergy and see, what coaches are running nowadays. And I remember starting out in the SEC with Kentucky, Alabama,
Mhm.
and just started posting. And then from there, it kind of just took off.
That's great. And you use a nice word that I like there. You said a tool. Okay. So um you, like you said, you've been coaching for 10 years,
Mhm.
and through these 10 years you can kind of like see different kinds of athletes. They learn differently and whatnot. Talk about how you use film to help this generation of players.
Right. Um, I think a lot of it's just that one on one,
Hmm.
right? A lot of it's that sitting down with players. Um, and just, I think, as the years have gone on, I think now I feel like it's a lot more collaborative with the players, right? Especially at the university and pro levels. They're teaching me more than I'm teaching them. You know what I mean? Where at the beginning it may have been more one sided and me kind of telling the player, hey, you should be doing this, this, and this. But now it's you know what are your thoughts on this? What are you thinking? During this play, what do you see? Right. So having that open conversation with the players and I think it's a great way to build that relationship, build that trust with the players. But it's so important. At the professional level, we use it every day, right? We use film every day, and those sit downs, those one on ones with players. The film could be 5 minutes, it could be 30 minutes, right? But I
Mhm.
think just always going back to it and just continuing to learn. I think it's so important for both sides, both the
Mhm.
player and the coach. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, you're touching on a lot of different things, and it's like, so me pre-COVID, I had just like I was pretty young into my coaching career, pretty young.
yeah,
Um, so I'm sure we've all done this with in our first year of coaches, we think, yo, I'm going to turn this team into monsters. You make a big playbook, you got 50 plays. you,
yeah.
you make everybody go through everything. You're like, yo, I'm gonna have the nicest press. I'm going to have the greatest plays. I'm gonna have all of these things, da da da. And it's like, you go through it and you realize like, okay, like this is not working. So at one point I started really realizing that less was more.
Hmm.
So I started kind of like going along that path where okay, I would kind of like teach players less, like take it, hey, what do you guys need? Not overload them with too much stuff. Um, but then came I was always told by coaches, you gotta watch basketball, you gotta watch film, you gotta watch basketball, you gotta watch film.
Hmm.
And at one point I remember myself asking a coach that at the time was mentoring me. I was like, coach, how do I watch film? How do I watch it? Because the reality was like I could watch it, but what am I looking for?
Right.
And I kind of find that a lot of times the way that people get more captivated by film, the way that they watch basketball and all that kind of stuff, it's because there's something that they're looking for, right?
Hmm.
So I found it perfect for me to bring the film expert on this. So if you were to tell a young player that is just starting off, said that they love basketball, how to watch film, what should they be looking for?
For sure. I think the first thing, and you kind of alluded to it, is you have to see it from a different perspective, right? As basketball fans, I think we see it from one dimensional, and we're so fixated on the ball and what the player is doing with the ball. I think that's natural, right? People
Yeah.
who love the game of basketball, that's what you're doing. You're watching out of pure joy, right? You watch Steph Curry, you're watching what he's doing with the ball. Um, but from a coach's perspective, I think you really got to take a step back and analyze, what's happening on the court with all 10 guys,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think it's something you consciously have to do, right? Because I think we're so used to just watching, what's happening with that one player. But, you know, when you ask, how do you watch film? I think you really got to take a step back and see, what's transpiring as a whole. I think that's the first thing, you have to do. And then really to simplify that question, I think it's, there's two parts to it. I think the first part being is, what is being run? Whether you're looking at the
Mm-hmm.
offensive side or on the defensive side, right? What are they doing? What are they trying to accomplish? Right. So what
Mm-hmm.
plays are they running? What actions are they running? I think this comes from, reading books, watching YouTube videos, like you said, having a mentor, not
Mm-hmm.
being afraid to ask questions and really try to, expand your knowledge and expand that IQ. I think that's, first and foremost, that has to be the foundation. Right. So once you get a good feel of the different actions and you're comfortable and you're able to look at a play and say, yeah, that's an Iverson set or that's a floppy set. I think
Mm-hmm.
that helps absolutely. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next layer to it is why, right? And that's a bit more complex. As all right, they're running an Iverson set. Now it's like, okay, why? What are they trying to accomplish running this certain player off this set? Right? Are they trying to get the ball to this specific player in the area? Are they running this specific action, knowing how the defense is, playing it, and it's going to give them an advantage on the offensive end? I think those are really the two, primary questions when it comes to watching film, right? So what is being run, and then digging a bit deeper and trying to find out why it's being run. So I think if you continually ask yourself, those questions throughout the game, I think it just helps, with the overall basketball IQ. It helps break down the plays, possession by possession. Then you can kind of start, finding that story. You can kind of start building that case of, what's being run, why it's being run, what exactly is the team trying to do to help themselves win the basketball game at the end of the day.
Right. The story, like I like when the word you use, story. I think it's so easy to kind of like disengage, and like as young players, a lot of times like it's not just young players. Let me take that back. Just as if I have a team and I'm on the team and then we're having a film session, most of the time, even if I'm on the bench, I'm watching myself. Like
Right.
it's so like, you're curious, like, yo, what are you watching yourself and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think for like, because the coaching perspective is different than the player perspective. I kind of feel like from a coach standpoint, you look at how all five pieces are moving on the chessboard.
Right.
But as a player, if let's say let's look at both scenarios. If let's say I am a player, I'm on offense, I have the ball. And then I'm watching the film. Like, what would be like simple things that I could look for? Just really simple thing. I have my defender on me. There's the rest of the four players. I have the ball. What are some simple things that I should be looking at that help me decide if I made the good read or not?
Right. I think, in relation to that question, I think a lot of it is, the process of it. Right. So I think sometimes players often look at the outcome, right? So they often look at, did the shot go in? Did it miss? But I think, the process of, was that a good possession? Was that a good shot? Could we have got something better? Right. And I think it comes down to just making the simple play. Right. So seeing what's in front of that player, how do you simplify it? How do you make the simple play? How are you trying to create an advantage, as a player with the ball, right? That could be, trying to attack downhill and initiate or trying to get two on the ball and then kick out. It could be as simple as a quick reversal, right? So I think it's, like you said, though, it's seeing what's in front of them. What are the other four players on defense doing? And how am I going to create a quick advantage off of it? By minimizing my dribbles and keeping it as simple as possible.
Considering that we have five players on the court for the most part of the game, most players are not going to have the ball in their hands.
Right.
So as an off-ball player, a player that doesn't have the ball in their hand, when I'm rewatching the film, or even when I'm just looking at how the proper spacing or the proper positioning or the proper cues for a good possession with me not touching the ball, what are some things that I can look for? Because we talked about the on-ball part. That's what everybody wants. Everybody thinks it's with the ball, right? But now off-ball is like so important, so valuable. So what are some things that, as an off-ball player, when you're rewatching the film, could be like, yeah, that was a good possession for me off-ball?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, there's a few ways to look at it, right? So one is opportunities to cut, right? So, as an off-ball player, what can I do now to, put pressure on the rim? Maybe I'm able to attract two to the paint, and that's going to open up someone else. But a lot of it's holding space, right? Like a lot of it is waiting your turn. And, Coach DeVero at TMU,
My guy.
he preaches this all the time. And it's something that stuck with me as well as, a lot of times, whether at the prep level, university level, even at the pro level, guys are attracted to the ball, right? Guys want the ball in their hands and they're going to continue to make their way towards the ball. But sometimes the best play is just, standing in the corner and waiting. Right? Whether you get the ball or you don't, that's the best thing for your team on that possession. right? It's
Right.
just be patient and waiting for your turn, right? If the ball
Mhm.
gets swung to you, you're ready to make a play. But I think that's something that has to be continue to be taught to players, right?
Mhm.
Is that patience
Mhm.
aspect of it? And hey, there's gonna be times where you might not touch the ball 2, 3 times in a possession,
Yeah.
and that's okay, right? So I think continuing to preach that towards players and having them understand, patience is key, especially in the game of basketball.
Absolutely. You share a lot of stuff on Twitter, on social, on just on your socials. Um and you use some words that I really liked. You said good shot, simple play, creating advantages, all that kind of stuff. So um when a play catches your eye, right? What what is it about the play that makes you be like, yo, that was a good play, or that makes you want to share it?
For sure. I think, first and foremost, I think it's spacing of it. I think that's something that definitely catches my eye is good spacing. The pace of what the players run at, right?
Mm,
So guys cutting with a purpose, putting pressure on the rim. So when you put those two together, right, that's something that's been, talked about a lot, especially in the past 5, 10 years, is the pace and space, of basketball and of the offensive end.
mhm.
Um, and then I think the quality of the shot, right? So something I look at a lot is, whether it's at the rim, is it a dunk, is it a layup, catch and shoot three? I think those things obviously attract my eye and something I continue to look at, right? Because that's where the game is continuing to trend, right? Layups, dunks, and catch and shoot threes. So I try my best to stay away from the one-on-one play and over dribbling and stuff like that, right? But a lot of it's that pace, that space, trying to get stuff towards the rim and trying to open up a 3-point shooter.
For sure. You're watching. So, question for you. This is just for me. This is completely off topic, but like, how much basketball, how much film do you watch in like a day?
Honestly, it's up and down throughout the year, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
a
Uh-huh.
lot of it's dependent on what else is going on. Right now, I haven't been watching as much. I've been watching a bit more summer league, but a lot of it's focused with Scarborough. During the year, with TMU, I try my best to watch at least an hour, whether that's before my day starts or at the end before I go to bed. Really try to do a deep dive and look at different games and see
Mhm.
what different teams are running. But throughout the week, it's definitely quite a bit. And basketball will always be on in the background, whether it's NCAA, NBA. It's definitely
Yeah.
playing. But I try to really lock in and focus for at least 1 hour every day.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And just the consistency of just the more you watch, the more I guess you start picking up, because now you're kind of at that stage where like now it's so second nature to you that like you'll naturally be drawn to the game. So you'll naturally just pick up on certain things.
Right.
Right. And that comes with like, I'm assuming that comes with just like reps, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think yeah, a lot of it, comes down to reps and it just becomes habitual,
Yeah.
of watching film and like I said, having it on in the background and
Hmm.
you just naturally, your eyes kind of just gravitate towards it
For sure.
and you kind of lock in. Yeah.
For sure. Let me ask you this. What are some actions? What are the actions that you're seeing the most now? Like common, like what are some actions that you're seeing the most?
I'd say the most common, especially the last 1 to 2 years, has been that corner pin
Mm-hmm.
action
Mm-hmm.
where, whether you have the primary ball handler coming off a mid pick and roll, and as he's coming off, they have that baseline screen where the guy in the corner is setting, different teams will call it different things. I've heard it called a corner pin or an exit screen, a baseline screen. I think that's, one really hard action to guard. I think it's a good job of manipulating, right, the two side tag and removing that guy, and especially when teams are in a drop. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a good lob threat on it. Um, I think Spain Spain pick and roll can,
Mm,
teams will run that at a high level, and now coaches are getting more and more, creative of thinking about counters, on the Spain and having slip outs and
yeah,
setting quarter screens. Say those two, and then split actions. I
split
think,
actions.
yeah,
Yes.
with two guys, and
Yeah.
I think teams are continually trying to attack or trying to, find ways of attacking, switching defenses, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. So splits are like if let's say I have the ball at the top of the key or at the high post, two
mhm,
players kind of like come together and then they kind of like make that read on either one person's diving to the basket or one person's popping out to the three and all that kind
exactly.
of stuff, right? What makes that hard to guard?
I think it's the communication aspect. I
Right.
think teams have to communicate so well, and I think the more pace you do it with, the harder it is to guard, right? So, like you said, having that one player, put pressure on the rim, and then that one player come back towards the ball. I think when it's run with really good pace, like I said, with more teams switching, right, a lot of those players slipping towards the rim, they're going to have inside position, for that pass, right? So I think, seeing that more and more often. I think Golden State, that's the first team that comes to mind. They do a great job with Clay, Steph, and they have Draymond as a primary playmaker. Um, yeah, it's a tough one to guard. It's a tough one to guard when,
Yeah.
and you can practice it, but when it's happening at full speed and you're a second off on the communication, it'll lead to either a layup or an open three.
So what I tell my players to kind of get them to understand is as much as there are like when there's turnovers on offense, you
Hmm.
got to try to get the defense to make turnovers on defense, right?
Right.
So the way that I kind of say the word turnover, it's kind of like the more you get the defense communicating, the more
Hmm.
misdirection you could kind of like get him into before you get into the real action. I kind of think like the success rate of the actual of what you're actually trying to get, actually the percentage actually goes up because I find a lot of times like certain certain plays or certain situations get stagnant, right? Or like
Hmm.
if let's say I want to pick and roll and I just call for the pick and roll, and now there's the whole help defense just loading up to the ball, so it makes it easier for them to be able to guard and clog up the space, right?
Right.
So if I could get maybe one cutter, two cutter, and then I get my pick and roll coming, sometimes it increases kind of like those chances for success, right?
Right.
So are there like because you're at the university level, like are there ways to like teach that? Are there cues that you tell players like, hey, when this happens, go because we need to clear this out? You're cutting here because this is what we're actually trying to get.
Right. I think so. Yeah. Right. So it's whether it's built into the offense or it's more of a concept, right? And some people call it like the absolutes, right? So if this action is happening, this is what you have to do, based on the action. Um, I think a lot of that comes with reps, and you might see that more at the higher levels, especially at the NBA level. They have a pretty good grasp on it.
Right.
Um, I feel like at the prep and even the university level, right? Sometimes you got to give them a lot more direction and saying, hey, this is the exact set we're running. It requires you to come and whether it's set a ram screen or set a flare screen at this time. I think, giving them that structure and that direction, often helps. And then based off that, then they get a good feel for, okay, this is what I should be doing at this time. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. You seeing any you're are you seeing any trends or any teams in particular that you think people should be watching that kind of like where every time either you learn something new?
Yeah, from the NCAA level, um, my favorite teams that I like watching. There's a handful of them, but I think Purdue. I think Coach Painter. He's one of the best X's and O's coaches. In NCAA. Um, I think Marquette with Shaka Smart, and I know their assistant Nevada Smith. They do a really good job of 5-0, and their pace of their offense is incredible to watch. UConn this past year, they did an unbelievable job throughout the tournament, and UConn was a bit different, right? So I think watching basketball, a lot of teams they try to create an advantage early, right? So early in the shot clock, they're going to try to create that advantage and then play off the advantage. UConn was a bit different, where you know they would run a set for 8, 10, 12 seconds, right, and then finally get to the advantage, and it's like teams knew it was coming, but they couldn't stop it, right? There are a few sets
Mhm.
they ran where they would run double stagger to one side, another stagger to the other side. It would take 8 to 10 seconds, and you kind of saw the play unfolding, but they would still get a quality shot off. So UConn was really fun to watch. Virginia Tech is another team.
Mhm.
Um, there's so many good teams, right, at NCAA level, whether it's high major, mid to low, right? There's so many good coaches out there.
Mhm.
Um, and then at the NBA level, Utah, I thought they ran a lot of good stuff with their young pieces this year. Sacramento, Denver with Jokic, they're always fun to watch. There's so many good teams, but
Mhm.
I would say yeah, those would be a few that I like to kind of focus in on throughout the year.
Um, Talk about how plays in the NBA are very different than plays in the NCAA. Just like some key pointers, because I think I think what people have to understand is that the game is different, right? There's different rules, the spacing is different. I'll kind of let you get into it, but just talk about how, especially when you're watching these plays, right? A play that you're running in the NBA might not work in the NCAA.
Right.
Right.
The biggest thing with the NBA is that a lot of it's matchup based, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's something you don't really often see at the NCAA level. I think really the only team that comes to mind is UCLA, and they'll run a lot of matchup
Mm,
based offense, and
yeah.
they'll
And
kind
Baylor,
of
when they won that chip, they were really like attacking. There was a lot of boomerang actions where they were like, get it out, get it back, and then just get downhill whenever teams would switch against them. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Cronin does a lot of that, where they're going to attack certain players throughout the game, and they're going to stick with that matchup. And that's something you really see at the NBA level, especially playoff time, right? It's you kind of strip everything away, and you're not running these complex actions. A lot of it's how do I get my best player to try to create an advantage against their worst defensive player, right? So a lot of it in the NBA Finals, a lot of it's you know ball screen and pistol, and that's really what you're looking for. Is you're trying to create that advantage with your best offensive player, whether it's Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Jokic, Jamal Murray, right? And now defenses are coming, more and more creative of trying to hide certain guys and try to keep them out of action, right? So it's pretty cool to see, especially in playoff time. But I think yeah, there's a huge difference, right, in the NCAA game, and I think it's more team oriented and full offensive systems, installed with coaches compared to the NBA level, which you might see more, during the season. But I think playoff time, that's really the MO for a lot of these teams and a lot of these coaches is it's going to be matchup basketball, and we're going to get our, the ball to our best players' hands, and we're going to be picking on their worst defender for as long as we can until they make an adjustment.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, in the NBA, like I said, rules, right? So offensive player has the advantage most of the time, right? Hand checks is you could probably be a little more physical in college.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the fact that you can't have players sit in the lane kind of
Yeah.
changes up certain things that you can't really do. So, do you want to kind of like talk a little bit about that? Like just about just the defensive 3 seconds in the NBA and the fact that it's not there at other levels.
Oh, for sure, right? That's such a game changer, right? And it's specific to the NBA, right? At our level with
Mm,
Scarborough, all right, with FIBA rules, we're allowed having that player in the key and kind of just waiting, and having them kind of as a roamer. But yeah, I think there's a huge advantage for the highly skilled offensive players in the NBA, and like you said, the hand checking and driving lanes being open and the 3-point line being further. It forces that defender now to guard 22, 23, 24 feet out, especially against a shooter like Trey or Dame and Steph, right? Where it's very tough. I don't think people understand how tough it is to really lock up 24 feet from the basket, and knowing that you don't have someone sitting in the lane, ready to block a shot.
For sure. So let's help our high school coaches here. So if we had some high school coaches, because we got to show the high school some love. High school coaches, if high school coaches are planning to have like a playbook, right? How do they go about kind of like creating their playbook? Like what plays work and all that kind of stuff, right? Like what are the steps to choosing like proper plays for their playbook?
For sure, I think there's a few different steps to it. I think the first and foremost is keeping it simple, right? Whether high school or other levels, I think simple wins at the end of the day, right? So really trying to simplify what actions, how am I going to be able to teach it, and how easy is it for the players to be able to absorb it, as quickly as possible, and for them to understand it at a high level. I think that's the first step. I think KYP, right? So understanding
Mm-hmm.
what your players are, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how am I going to fit this playbook to really showcase what they can do, right? So putting them in the best situations. If they're not a great ball screen read team, then I'm probably not going to have a heavy ball screen offense, right? So I think really just trying to understand your team, to the best of your ability. I think that helps. And then, one thing is, this is something I've learned over the years is being able to build encounters, right? So then going a step further and saying, okay, if I'm going up against myself, how am I going to defend these plays? And now what counters can I put into these sets where I'm not calling a timeout to tell them, hey, this is what we're going to run, but you could call it from the sidelines, or you can have the players, they start noticing, hey, this is how they're defending this action. Let's go right to our counter, which is already, built into the play. I think those are, three things, especially when I'm trying to build out a playbook, that I try to do to the best that I can.
Yeah. Would you suggest that for building it, is it more about like kind of like see what you have first, like with your players, and then kind of like create plays that kind of like put guys into their strength?
I think you go either way. I think
Yeah.
even giving them different plays and seeing how they're able to play out of it. I think that's you're able to speed up the process and say, yes, we're going to keep that one, or no, that one didn't look too good at this point of the season. Maybe we'll come back to it later on in the season, right? But I think don't be scared to put them in different situations and throw different actions at them. I think you'll be surprised on how quickly players really understand and grasp information, right? Even at the high school level,
Mm,
for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Coach Rio, thank you. This was amazing. I got one last question for you.
Yep.
If you have one play or just one action that you got to take, and that's your go-to action, the one you want to be known for, what would it be? Or it could be your favorite.
For the whole duration of a game.
If you gotta, we're running it, but this play is so good. Obviously, we're not gonna run the same play for the whole game, but like it's such a great play. I love it. Like it's one that that you love, that you want to keep. Which one is it?
I'd probably go Spain pick and roll. That'd be my number one for sure. I think as long as you have a point guard that's able to make the reads out of it, I think it's a very tough action to guard, and you can get into it in so many different ways.
So the different levels of it is a point guard that can make a play. What's the teaching points of it? What's the teaching points? What are you telling your point guard to look for? What are you telling your other people involved in the Spain?
Right. I think first and foremost, you want the point guard to be aggressive, right? So coming off any ball screen, I think they definitely have to be a threat going towards the rim. I think that's really what opens up the other players. The big, I think they have to, once they make contact, they got to get to the front of the rim. as quickly as possible. I've seen sometimes they like to hang out by that nail, by that free
Hmm.
throw line, but they got to put pressure on the rim right away. And then for the guys setting the back screen, right? I think once again, hitting and getting out to that 3 point line, as quickly as possible. And sometimes not even hitting, right? Just ghosting it out and slipping out to the 3 point line. But, as a point guard, I think putting pressure on the rim, being able to read what the big defender is doing, how they're playing it. And then oftentimes, I think that pop guy and that shooter, they're open on the perimeter as well, right? So being able to make those three reads at quick a quick pace, I think it definitely helps.
Coach Rio, thank you so much for your time. Excited to see what you got going on. Wishing you a great season with Scarborough. But where can people find you?
They can find me on my Twitter.
Yeah, at throw your plug him in so they can follow. Please, I encourage people to go follow.
Right, it's just my name. So at Mario Celebre. So Mario, last name Celebre. That's my Twitter handle, Coach Rio. I appreciate you though. This was a lot of fun.
I'm happy we got the chance to do it. Thank you for making some time in your busy season. Like knowing the both of us, we're probably gonna go watch some film at some point today. So
For sure. For sure.
Appreciate you, my guy. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care. Have a great night.